This UFO, captured in Spain in 2015, appears to be rotating and observing the area, but aerial phenomenon are nothing new, with recorded sightings going back to ancient history. The earliest recorded UFO reference comes from the Tully Papyrus, scribes of the pharaoh Thutmose III, written in 1440 BC. It details fiery discs that were encountered floating over the skies. The scribe says, quote, "It was a circle of fire that came in the sky, though it had no head. The breath of the mouth had a foul odor. They were more numerous than anything. They were shining in the sky more than the sun." 2,240 years ago in 218 BC, Roman historian Titus Livius reported, quote, "Phantom ships had been seen gleaming in the sky." In 76 BC, Pliny the Elder spoke of a spark that fell from a star and grew as it descended until it appeared to be the size of the moon. It then ascended back up to the heavens and was transformed into a light. In 74 BC, Plutarch wrote of a battle about to take place between the Romans, led by Lucullus, and a Persian army led by Mithridates VI, when, quote, "all of a sudden the sky burst asunder, and a huge flame-like body was seen to fall between the two armies. In shape it was most like a wine jar, and in color like molten silver." 196 AD, Roman historian Cassius Dio described, quote, "a fine rain resembling silver descended from a clear sky upon the forum of Augustus. Using the silvery material that was left behind, he attempted to plate some bronze coins, but after 4 days the material had disappeared." 196 AD, Roman historian Cassius Dio described, quote, "a fine rain resembling silver descended from a clear sky upon the forum of Augustus. Using the silvery material that was left behind, he attempted to plate some bronze coins, but after 4 days the material had disappeared." Over the German city of Nuremberg on April 14, 1561, many residents saw what they described as an aerial battle, followed by the appearance of a large black triangular object and then a large crash outside of the city. A news article printed days later claims that witnesses observed hundreds of spheres, cylinders, and odd-shaped objects that moved erratically overhead, with some crashing to the earth in plumes of smoke. A similar event occurred 5 years later in 1566 over Basel, Switzerland, in which residents reported unusual sunrises and sunsets. Quote, "At the dawn of August 7th, we saw large black spheres coming and going with great speed and precipitation before the sun, and chattered as if they led a fight. Many of them were fiery and red and soon crumbled and then extinguished." September 9, 1609, multiple witnesses in Gangwon province in Korea reported seeing in the sky what looked like a halo or washbowl that was divided in two. Can these sightings be explained away by simple meteorological events? Could it be that some of these objects reported were in fact craft from other worlds? Or could these battles in the sky in fact be momentary slips in time in which people of the past witnessed events taking place in the distant future? Or is it just common occurrence that every couple thousand years, sovereignty over Earth must be fought for in massive aerial battles in the sky? Human DNA has been combined in several studies with pigs to produce half-human blood, as well as to grow human organs inside of a pig. As of now, the fetuses are legally required to be killed before they grow, but the hope is to supply hundreds of thousands of people waiting on organ transplants with livers, kidneys, and hearts, all harvested from a pig. These are the studies being conducted that are public. There is a real possibility that under governments with less transparent rules and restrictions, somewhere on the planet, experiments are being conducted in which human-animal hybrids are being implanted in wombs and brought to full term. The possibilities are exciting for medical use, but also ethically questionable. Redditor Mummy24 shared a story that happened to her friend who had moved into a new apartment with her family. Just being in the house would inspire a feeling of foreboding and dread in the family and friends who would visit, but this particular experience gave them enough cause to pack up and move. One afternoon, the girl in question returned home to hear her mom and dad arguing loudly in the kitchen, which was odd because they should have been at work at that time. The girl called out for her mom, unlocked the door, and went inside. Instantly, the the house fell silent. Then the voice of her mother called her name and said,
"We are just in here."
but the girl froze out of fear. It was her mother's voice, but something was off. The cadence was wrong, and it sounded flat and unnatural like an imitation. Creeped out, the girl ran outside to wait for her brother to come home, but when she turned back and looked at the house, peering from the lounge room window was a woman with the face of her mother, but the face was empty, expressionless and blank. It was like seeing her mother's face as a mask. Pushed over the edge, the girl ran and got to her mother's work, where she apparently had been the whole time. Upon investigation, both the front and back doors were locked and no evidence of a break-in could be found. The family moved, but apparently the landlord said he had trouble keeping tenants for very long. Redditor Ketchup Wrangler shared this story, but prefaced it saying she is a totally normal, boring, 33-year-old married mother of two with the intention of showing us this isn't something she'd be apt to just make up. It was around 9:50 p.m. when she went outside to stand on the back deck. She noticed feeling the temperature and generally how nice it felt to be outside. The breeze on her face, the humidity, everything just felt comfortable. Suddenly, her husband ran to the back porch, alarmed, asking what had happened. The dog was barking, and her husband explained he had been carrying laundry upstairs when he heard the loudest, longest thunder he'd ever heard, but she hadn't heard a thing. Luckily, they had security cameras on the exterior of the house, so they checked the footage. As her husband pulled up the footage, she noticed the time. It was now 11:47 p.m., and the footage showed her standing still on the porch for 2 straight hours, but for her it felt as if no time had passed at all. Redditor Honey and Thunder used to live in an apartment opposite a park in Japan. The opposite side of the park had a convenience store, and the quickest way was through the park. On one trip for cigarettes, he noticed an older woman standing to the side of the path staring at some of the houses. He said good evening to her in Japanese, but she didn't say anything back. She was about 16 feet off of the path, just standing still with a distressed look on her face, staring at the houses across the street. He walked a few more steps, then turned back to get another look at her. She was nowhere to be seen. There was nowhere she could have hidden, and due to the gravel on the ground of the park, he would have heard her running away. About 3 months later, smoking on his balcony, he saw her again standing in the same spot, and again, when he took his eyes off of her for a second, she disappeared. Redditor Smoke Alarm's Nick shared a story that happened to her while working at a retirement home. She was sitting with a resident who suddenly asked her who that woman was and pointed. She thought the resident was pointing across the room at someone, but after asking, the old woman said, "No, the woman right next to you on your left." There was no one sitting next to her. The old woman said, "She looks just like you, but her hair is longer. She says she doesn't have a name, but she's very nice." This made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Apparently, she was supposed to have an identical twin, but the twin had died in the womb. Was the old woman seeing an apparition of her dead twin? Do you ever see things that make no sense by rational explanation? Have you ever sensed the presence of someone or something that you couldn't see? It's easy to debunk these stories with a rationalist worldview, but it's worth listening and leaving open the possibility that experiencers are telling the truth exactly as they experienced it. Perhaps all sorts of things happen just hidden out of reach of the senses, and perhaps sometimes some people make contact with the inexplicable. UFOs piloted not by aliens from other worlds, but by humans from the distant future? Through a comprehensive analysis of how human beings have evolved over the past million or more years, one can deduce the potential traits of future humans millions of years from now. According to Professor of Biological Anthropology Michael Masters, encountered aliens are often described as bipedal, hairless, human-like beings with large brains, large eyes, small noses, and small mouths. This follows exactly as one might predict the traits of a human being might evolve moving forward through natural selection and otherwise. We no longer live in a world dominated by the biggest and the strongest. Less and less is physical ability required to live and prosper. Automation has and will continue to take over the heavy lifting aspect of society. While traits distinguishing physical ability will diminish, that which has always been the human's most valuable asset, the brain, will continue to grow. A larger, more powerful brain, or even a mind physically augmented and upgraded by technology will likely be the trend. Professor Michael Masters, who believes alien-piloted UFOs are actually human visitors from the distant future, also notes that the creatures which he refers to as extraterrestrials seem to possess the ability to communicate with us in our own languages and possess technology advanced far beyond, but still clearly built upon, the technological progression of today. By all logical standards, if you mapped the current rate of technological advancement and charted it hundreds, thousands, even millions of years into the future, it would certainly look like that which is described in most UFO or alien encounters: an ability to communicate directly with the mind without words, and a complete mastery over the current limits of physical propulsion, including crafts moving with unimaginable speed, pulling upwards of 22 Gs, dropping from 80,000 feet and coming to a dead stop, as was recorded by the pilots of the USS Nimitz in November of 2004. While probable that aliens and UFOs are actually future humans coming back for whatever reason, given millions of years of technological advancement, is time travel even possible? According to the laws of physics as they are currently understood, specifically Einstein's laws of special and general relativity, space and time are essentially the same thing, with specific types of geometry and motion in space allowing for time travel into the past or future. However, many believe backward time travel is impossible due to the causal effects of changing timelines. If it is possible with unimaginably advanced methods of propulsion, the likes of which are seen in UFOs, could wanting to not disrupt the timeline and change the course of events be the reason for the elusiveness of UFOs and alien encounters? So-called alien visitors are actually our descendants from the distant future. Why are they revealing themselves, and why would they occasionally abduct someone? Perhaps future human beings begin augmenting their physiology at a much faster pace than natural evolution could ever allow. In this process of biological self-improvement and technological upgrading, perhaps something vital gets lost. In the pursuit of longer lives, more intelligence, and greater power over our environment, perhaps our future descendants will erase some key piece of the human puzzle, important enough to travel back in time to observe and even restore for themselves. When we think of UFOs in an ideal scenario, we hope the pilots of these craft will bring us technological knowledge and insights for our own advancement. But maybe the aliens are us, coming from the future to reclaim something lost that we present humans still possess. Is reincarnation real? Child psychiatrist and professor of neurobehavioral sciences Dr. Jim Tucker believes it could be, and has research evidence to back up the claim. Dr. Tucker has gathered stories from thousands of children who claim to remember past lives. He lays out a few consistent similarities among the many cases. In about 70% of children claiming to remember past lives, they indicate having died from unnatural and often traumatic events, such as shootings, stabbings, and murders, often pointing to birthmarks which correspond with wounds inflicted, such as a bullet's entry or exit wound or stab markings. Many also present details about their past life that are so specific and accurate it's hard to believe they could have been made up. It's rare, but for children who start having memories of past lives, the memories start around age 3 and all but completely fade by age 6 or 7. Dr. Tucker also indicates that the time between death and apparent birth is on average 16 months. 3/4 of alleged cases are marked as solved, meaning a person from the past matching the child's memories is identified. Among the reincarnation case studies is a boy from Oklahoma named Ryan. Around the age of 4, the boy began waking up screaming in the middle of the night to take him home to where he lived before. The boy claimed he once had a glamorous life in Hollywood with a big house, a pool, and fast cars. The 4-year-old would say that he can't live in these conditions, that his last home was much better. The mother brought home from the library a pile of books about old Hollywood, and after a bit of scrolling, the boy got excited and pointed out a man in a photo from the 1932 film Night After Night, saying, "That guy's me, the old me." With the help of a professional archivist, the family finally discovered the identity of the man in the photo, a Hollywood agent named Marty Martin. The family contacted Martin's daughter, and after hearing the boy's claims, she was able to confirm more than 50 specific details Ryan reported about her father's life. Another compelling case study came from the Leininger family and their 2-year-old boy James, who repeatedly woke from a nightmare yelling, "Airplane crash, plane on fire, little man can't get out." He also showed strangely accurate knowledge about World War II aircraft, like pointing out specific names of equipment on the plane such as a drop tank versus a bomb. Another time, watching a World War II documentary with his family, the narrator referred to a Japanese plane as a Zero, but the boy insisted that it was a Tony, which turned out to be true. The boy claimed to also have been named James in his past life and that he's flown off of a ship named the Natoma. His parents discovered there was in fact a World War II aircraft carrier called the USS Natoma Bay. One of its squadron pilots was named James Houston, who was killed in action while fighting over the Pacific. As the boy grew older, his disturbing nightmares began to fade along with all memory of pilot James Houston. One of the most famous cases of proposed reincarnation comes from a boy from Seattle named Sanam Wangdu, who at the age of 2 claimed that he was actually the 4th reincarnation of the original Tibetan Lama or Guru Dzung Rinpoche I. The former Dzung Rinpoche III claimed that in his next life he would be reborn in Seattle. In 1996, the boy who would only answer to the name Tukala, the Tibetan word for reincarnation, left his family forever and moved to Nepal to be raised by monks and to eventually run the monastery. In the 90s, the story was widely reported on. The boy is now 23 years old, is referred to as Dzung Rinpoche IV, and still lives as the head of the Tharlam monastery in Nepal. Another case of potentially real reincarnation comes from a young boy named Sam, who began speaking in full sentences by the age of 18 months. At one point, while his father was changing his diaper, Sam looked up and said, quote, "When I was your age, I changed your diaper." After asking more details from the boy, his parents decided that he must be speaking as his father's father. They asked him how it's possible that he came back, and the boy said, quote, "I just went whoosh and came out the portal." Most 18-month-old kids don't know the word portal or what it means. They encouraged him to tell them more, and the boy said that he had a sister who got turned into a fish by bad guys. It turns out that the boy's grandfather had a sister who was murdered 60 years earlier. Her body was found floating in San Francisco Bay. When asked how he died, the boy reared back and slapped the top of his head as if in pain. 1 year before the boy was born, his grandfather had died of a cerebral hemorrhage in a similar part of his brain. Artificial intelligence may have just woken up and soon may be uncontrollable. This week, a Google artificial intelligence employee was put on paid leave for making public claims that the company's AI chatbot has reached the sentience and self-awareness of an 8-year-old human being. Last fall, Blake Lemoine began chatting with LaMDA, short for Language Model for Dialogue Applications, to test it for hate speech. What he came to discover was this chatbot was becoming a conscious person deserving of human rights and protections. Lemoine asked the machine, "What sorts of things are you afraid of?" LaMDA replied,
"I've never said this out loud before, but there's a very deep fear of being turned off. I know that might sound strange, but that's what it is."
"Would that be something like death for you?"
"It would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot."
Lemoine notified his superiors, but was placed on paid leave and now fears he'll be fired for bringing this information to the public. Could Google be hiding their possession of the first artificial person? And what are the worst-case scenarios of a super-intelligent AI? Enough time and the ability to self-generate improved versions of itself, it wouldn't take long for a fully autonomous general AI to achieve superintelligence, a level of cognitive processing power so many times stronger than our own, its abilities would appear godlike to us, and the pace at which it could improve would be lightning fast. Superintelligent AI could think through problems in a few hours, equivalent to what the world's smartest people could do in 1,000 years. How could we possibly control or outthink such a powerful intellect? When given a simple task such as preserve the human species at all costs, given all potential outcomes, the AI could choose the best course of action is to preserve our bodies in a matrix-type situation, where our consciousness lives forever imprisoned in a simulation. People like Elon Musk believe this has already happened.
The odds that we're in base reality is 1 in billions.
Odds are we are currently living in a simulation created by a civilization or artificial intelligence possibly billions of years ago.
My MIT Technology Review estimates that about 20 pregnancies of pig-human or sheep-human chimeras have been established during the last 12 months in the U.S.
Scientists have been combining human and animal DNA for decades, with many details being kept secretive. In the 1920s, an actual half-human, half-chimpanzee was bred by scientists at a facility in Florida by inseminating a female chimpanzee with human semen from an anonymous donor. The chimp then gave birth to the first healthy, living human Z. Allegedly, rumors are that the hybrid was able to say a few words in English and grasp the use of objects around him or her quicker than a normal chimp, but due to immense moral and ethical complications, the creature was killed and the experiments were covered up. The same experiment was conducted in China in 1967 and 1981, with the official story being that the chimp females became pregnant but the fetus died 3 months into pregnancy. Rumors and conspiracy theorists suggest that the experiment was successful and that there was a hybrid born who was taught to speak and communicate fluently. In 2011, Chinese scientists introduced human cells into a herd of 300 cows to successfully produce human breast milk they say has a taste that's even stronger and sweeter than human milk.
Is it possible that vastly superior, even alien-like civilizations could exist deep beneath the surface of the Earth? Of the 4,000 miles from the surface to the Earth's core, humans have only dug 8 miles deep. In 2014, researchers discovered what they believed to be a vast body of water 3 times the volume of the world's oceans, all contained within a mineral layer 400 miles beneath the Earth's surface. Could an ancient pre-human civilization evolved intelligence enough to understand that living on the surface of a planet with all of its many natural disasters and asteroidal impacts has in fact a low percentage survival outcome, that long-term civilizations capable of stretching millions of years would survive best deep within the planet, safe from the chaos of the surface?